Welcome to another episode of Level 1 Restoration Behind the Scenes. We're here today with a very special Pontiac Firebird. It's a 1967 Firebird 404-speed convertible, but it was the car that Pontiac used to take out on the show circuit to show the world what a 67 Firebird was going to be. There was no Firebird prior to this time, so we're going to take a look at Pontiac show car to introduce the world to that. I'm here with Jeff Kelly. He and the guys have very meticulously disassembled this car, and we do that with really an eye for the details, to uncover the history of that, and that's what makes us, I think, a really special shop, because we really love that piece of the job.
The history is so important. You got to save and learn as much as you can about it.
And it would be really easy to take this car and have it blasted, and we in fact waited so we could all get together to make this video, but it was tempting to just send it out.
Just to get it off, and then you think about it and it's like, this is the one and only shot at something this important, so we really need to take our time on it.
So I guess to get started, right off the bat, the trim tag on this car is a really unique thing. It says show primer. Or prime,
Show
right?
prime.
Show prime. So we take that to mean that it was going to be a show car, which we know that it became a show car, but they finished it in primer.
It was left in primer, sent over to whomever would have turned it into the car you see, as a gray car, completely assembled, full interior, every emblem, everything. And then they completely disassembled it and painted everything in a pearl orange. For some reason, they didn't bother to take the doors off or the fenders off, or maybe if they had, they didn't bother to paint the cowl. They intentionally didn't want that painted. But they painted everything else. They went through an awful lot of effort to do it.
Yeah, so once this car was totally assembled, leaving the factory, the assembly line, then all of this was completely taken apart. All of the rubber, the seal, everything.
The chrome, if anybody knows F-body headers, these are horrible, and these guys took it apart to paint here.
So you had a huge effort.
Huge effort.
To put this car together, and we'll get into a lot of aspects of it. The interior is an amazing effort, really, what they did with this car. But what would be different in this cowl area
So
here
what's interesting here is they specifically did not want the cowl to be body color, which all Firebirds are body color in here. So when we sanded on it, we can see that there is no paint other than the gray primer and then the black that the guys making the car wanted it to be. So that's really unusual, definitely a custom touch they wanted.
And what you're seeing here is a repaint.
The aqua that came through when this car got painted aqua in who knows what year.
Right, and here is a stamped VIN number.
It's VIN number stamped in by hand.
It's VIN number 4, by the way.
And they were confused when they were stamping it because it's got a 4 over the 3.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So they were on the fly on that one, apparently.
I believe that number 3 is known to exist, and number 1 and 2 Firebirds are famously known.
Yep.
One is just a 2-barrel 326. The other is a 326 HO coupe, which is pretty cool.
That's a pretty neat car.
And then there was a 400 car in there, but those cars sat out on the floor, and people could touch those cars.
Yeah, those
and
were the
get
Magnificent Five.
Yeah,
as they called them.
And then this one sat out on the the spinner and the gals and the whole thing. So this was the most special car.
This was the show car.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as long as we're here, this car was built as a 4-speed, and it got converted into an automatic for...
Bill Mitchell is what...
Bill Mitchell wanted to drive it, so he wanted it as an automatic, so they converted it to an automatic. And when they did that, for some reason, rather than just using rubber plugs, they welded shut the clutch rod hole and the reverse light hole, which is an astonishing undertaking on an assembled car. I can't believe they do that.
And that information, by the way, I got from Jim Madison of PHS. And there are still some of these people that worked doing some of these projects. And that's where that little piece of information, maybe someone will see this and
say, that's completely wrong, this is why.
Or I was the guy that welded that hole up, you know,
Yes,
I don't know.
that would be fantastic.
We're always still looking for new, undiscovered information on these cars.
So, onto the interior.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Well, They had to pick something, right? So
Had to have an interior.
A white deluxe interior. We're not sure exactly, that doesn't really matter why they picked that. None of that was left.
No, it was all, they reused the seat, the front seats, but that's it. They even threw away the original fold-down rear seat that this car had.
Right, so when you get the invoice on it, it shows fold-down rear seat.
And it has evidence of it, but they did not want it for this show car for some reason.
Clearly not in the pictures. And that's very interesting on a show car, which we have found to be true, that it's not necessarily how they ordered the car.
Nope.
So there's a lot of things.
Things get changed, they add.
Right, so this car came with a hood tack, 4-speed console, rally wheels, fold-down rear seat, which they didn't retain, right?
A remote mirror.
A remote mirror, which they didn't retain.
We'll get into that.
We'll get back to the mirror. And then so in the photos of this car, we can see that the paperwork says red lines, but they put white walls on it. It also added a...
It's an AM/FM stereo car. No, it's an AM/FM car, but they added a Chevrolet-type multiplex.
They added splitters.
Tailpipe splitters. Those are not on the PHS, but it's a tailpipe splitter car in all the photographs.
Of course, it's total power windows.
Power windows, wood wheel, tilt wheel. Manual antenna on the AM/FM. I thought that was interesting.
Yes. And a rear antenna is close to being standard on a 67 Firebird.
Seems to be.
So many 67 Firebirds have that car. But so you can see here the white, where it would have been white on a...
On the standard interior, they had to give it something.
Yep.
Here are the brackets for the fold-down seat that they didn't use. On a standard seat, which a fold-down seat doesn't have, would be the 3 hooks along the back here. Well, they didn't have those in this car, so they screwed on just the pieces from the factory, basically, and put them in place to hang a new standard rear seat.
So, and this stuff was just done on the fly.
Yep.
In whatever department it was that they were building these cars. Forward in the interior, everything virtually you can imagine on this car was painted body color.
All the dash duct working, the column, the turn signals knobs.
The shift knob.
The shift knob is painted orange.
The emergency brake assembly.
Yeah, and we've got pieces over here we'll show you in a second. They painted everything pearl orange. Everything.
And so one huge departure from a 67 Firebird to this car, which is a detail that they added going forward, was the door panels.
Yep.
So these door panels are very much like a 68, 69 car, where it wraps all the way around this metal.
Where a 67 Firebird would have just come up to this line with a piece of chrome trim. So they handmade a piece of sheet metal as a cap and then vinyled over all of that.
So the orange material they used on the inside, and where they carried it through the column and the turn signal lever indicator and all of those things, are quite similar to what showed up on the Indy 500 pace car Camaros.
Yep.
So you wonder if this might have been some form of an inspiration for those later cars. It certainly impacted all of the upholstery and how the future looked. So what else, as we look back in this part of the car, did you guys find that
An interesting note, and I've never seen this on another Firebird, or a F-body convertible, I should say, is that they obviously brush painted this black in here, so when the window was, or the top was down, it could never be seen that it was gray or not body color. But they didn't want it body color because they could have easily painted it, and they didn't. So I find that very interesting. If anybody else knows that that's a standard thing, I'd like to know, because I'm intrigued.
And I think it's probably fair to say that while they were building these cars, a lot of this was just done on the fly.
Yep.
You know, like, hey, wait a second, we're going to have to do something there because that's just primer now.
When you see the doors, when we get over to the doors, you'll understand this was a chop shop job. They were just getting it done.
Right. Yeah, they weren't worried about what's underneath of some of this stuff, because they were a little bit rough with, we'll see the hole for the you know, the lock.
Oh, the lock cylinder, or the lock knob, unbelievable.
Okay, we're around to the back of the car here. A couple of interesting things that kind of break from normal assembly line Firebird Camaro type of a thing. What did you guys find back
So
here?
the back of this was completely leaded, and you could see how they'd cut a very fine line into it, and we thought they were just trying to make a really precise line and make it nice. And so when we torched it all out to do our blasting, we realized that they were just covering up bad work from GM, because the tail panel, it's sunk in here. I mean, I understand it's been dented and dinged and it's got a life, but it's welded in way too far over here. It's gigantically fat over here. It's just, the tail panel was not installed right, so they had to do something about it. So they weren't trying to necessarily make it custom, they were just trying to make it acceptable.
So, but the end result was that it's a beautiful line.
They did a beautiful job. We'll get pictures for you. They did a really nice job getting a nice, perfect line. So they did really nice work on it, finishing what GM Body by Fisher didn't do.
Right, and you know, being a brand new model, literally the fourth one of these constructed, I mean, they may just not have had their system down 100%.
Yeah.
Possibly. We don't really know. You know, and we'd love to hear from someone who was a part of that process, possibly.
It's interesting, the car has had many alarms on it. It has more holes drilled in the poor darn thing for alarms.
And that may speak to some of the history that we know just a little bit about, which we'll get to in a little bit. Maybe at this point we can take a closer look at some of the upholstery.
Oh, but quickly I want to show the blackout underneath it. Another interesting feature that they'd done is they painted the rocker panels black, and the pinch weld all the way around the car is hardlined and black underneath. That faces the ground, but they wanted it black. And the rockers make sense. They're at an angle and then the pinch weld goes down, but they're black as well. So they definitely had ideas of what they wanted to be seen and not seen.
And I guess being up on that platform, maybe spinning around.
Yep, you could probably see it. Underneath the car, a regular car would have had tons of overspray, body color on it. And this car was very carefully masked, and there is no overspray. Of the several paint jobs we know this car has had from the factory, there's no overspray underneath it. So they were very careful. They didn't want it black, they didn't want it orange, they left it gray. They were happy with that.
So what are we finding on there? Is it like an E-code? Is it black? Is it red oxide?
It's exactly like the cowl sides are. It's
So
just
gray.
Just a light gray. That's it. That's it.
Very interesting.
Yep, not like all the others.
All right, we're going to take a look at some of the upholstery, which is probably the most custom part of this entire car. If you know these cars at all, you would recognize that nothing here is regular standard Firebird or Camaro, quite frankly. We think that the whole ashtray business here is maybe from Cadillac.
I think it's Cadillac.
Yeah,
if anybody knows, let us know, but I think that's Cadillac.
At least Olds 98 or Buick Electra. Or
Yeah, 225.
Yeah. These pieces here, because of their size, are likely custom made directly for this car. Fortunately, we have them.
All of them.
Yeah, to restore. And then the power window switches and all that stuff are GM. It's all GM stuff.
It's all GM stuff. It's sourced from in-house.
Matter of where.
Where, right.
But, and then again, this door panel that comes up and covers the quarter panel, unlike other 67s. But let's have a look at what you've learned on this.
So then we go to the door panel. Door panels, the whole door is crazy. There's so much going on here. First off, if anybody can recognize what these custom lights are, again, Cadillac, Electra 225, if anybody has a thought on that, it has to be in-house GM. But they put these lights inside this custom door panel, and they have this custom brass panel, I guess, made, plated in chrome. But when they did that, they had to customize the inside of the door for all of these pieces. So they just cut away all the metal to recess for these lights. Kind of a hack job, but it worked.
Also, though, really quickly, the armrest is like a B-body.
Right, it's I call it a 65.6 Impala, but the armrest is out of a full-size car.
And the door opening handle.
The paddle handle as well.
Correct.
So these window fuzzies, these are just some custom aftermarket pieces of the day, because this wouldn't have existed, period.
Right.
Here, so the door panel's been on and off so many times that they had to put in their own fillers because they had lost their screw holes for the armrest bases. This car's been apart so many times. It is not attached, the door panel is not attached to the door in the normal fashion with the plugs. It has these 90-degree clips that go down through these slices and then are screwed in the end with a tiny Phillips. Very unique. I don't know why they did it that way, but a lot of effort.
Here would be the this remote mirror hole.
That it had, but it no longer has. It went to the shows with a square non-remote mirror. And if you think about it, there's no square mirror in 1967.
Right. Everything was round.
Everything was round. Chevy, Pontiac, doesn't matter. It's all round.
I mean, a Pontiac Grand Prix has a round mirror.
Remote or standard.
Right. So this car had basically what appears to be, we don't have a great photo of it, but an assembly line mid-year 68, 69 Camaro Firebird.
That's what it would appear to be.
Door mirror. They went on to use that on Chevelles, and pretty much everybody went to that. But this car literally built in the end of 1966.
Yes.
Almost certainly was the first car to have a square
To have
mirror.
a square side view mirror.
So whatever that's worth. And that's a cool thing about, with an emphasis on history, because that might not dawn on a lot of people.
Right. We just stumbled into it looking at the photos we have of it, and it's a bad picture, but it does show it, which is great.
Absolutely.
So, on the door. For some reason, they were having a hard time getting the door lock knob through the original hole and the door panel, so they've this giant hole drilled here.
Right.
And we're really fortunate because we have original orange that's never seen daylight. It's had a door panel on its whole life. So we have an excellent example to make paint off of.
Pearl on top of
Pearl on top of it. It's going to be a trick, but we think we have a solution.
Yeah. We're onto a color already, which is one of our biggest struggles at this point in time in our restoration business is getting an accurate color.
Getting an accurate color, it's terrible.
Metallics, nothing's the same. It's a moving target. It's changing all the time. We'll have, a dozen spray out cars and in and out of the sun and in this artificial light. But we may have stumbled onto this with just one lucky try.
Yeah.
No such thing as luck, but all right, what do we got
So
here?
moving over, they painted everything, and I wish I had some dash ducting because all the AC ducting and everything under the dash is orange. But an interesting thing is in this cluster is it should have a silver surround all the way around it, and it doesn't. So, and it doesn't look like it was removed. They probably asked GM or whoever sourced these, don't put a chrome ring on it because we don't want it. But it obviously never had one, which is an interesting touch that they wanted for sure.
Right.
Steering column. Nothing really surprising here. I just love that they painted everything on it. I mean, they were adamant about it. They got the bracket that's always black.
Right.
They did their knobs, of course, because they would have been interior color. They just really went all out in making this thing
Do
orange.
we think this is the parchment knob, probably painted?
Probably painted.
Orange.
Yep.
And this was probably painted as an assembly, does it look like?
Yep, no. So as a factory piece, it would have been painted without this bracket in place, and this would have all been white or red or whatever. But they painted this in the car and painted the mounting bracket with it because they didn't want it seen as black under there, apparently.
Right.
I don't think it was accidental. It wasn't being lazy. They wanted it orange. Everything about the upholstery is amazing to me, that it survived, that it's still here, that it didn't get painted black. It's just astonishing that it survived. And all of its pieces are here. So anybody that knows F-bodies will recognize that the back panel should not be vinyl covered, which this one is. It's padded and vinyl covered. And it had a chrome ring here, which we have, that surrounded the release. And then these chrome rings are handmade as well.
And it's like an Eldorado or a Riviera, but
not
exactly.
Because this seat back is only F-body.
Right.
But all of the custom pieces that are made on or for this car have I don't know if that's job order, stock order, or what. So this one is job 26711, and all the pieces on this car that are custom made like this have that have that number on.
I suppose they were needing to keep track of things. Obviously, there was more than one show car in '67, and this might have had something to do with billing or whatever their system was. And we found that in the Humbler
As well.
As well.
Yeah, lots of numbers on the Humbler pieces.
All right, we got a few very interesting things here with the deck lid on this car. So, I mean, the one, I'll point out the one and you point out the rest. The location of the 400 emblem
is unique. It's different.
It's forward, I guess, farther away from the rear edge.
Yep. It's higher up on the deck lid.
And then obviously not stamped like it would have been.
Cut by hand, or, I mean, it almost looks like, it's probably just a drill bit.
A little bit jagged, yeah.
Pretty rough. Rough.
What do you got here on these trunk jack stickers?
Well, what I find interesting is that it was a fully assembled car. It went out the door to drive, so it already had its trunk decals in place on top of its gray primer, and then they masked that off and painted it. But it's had 2 decals for some reason in the jacking location. I don't know why they would have needed to come back and put another one on there. Find that really interesting. I also find it interesting that they painted the deck lid in place. Now, I understand they wanted the color to match, but that is very difficult to get back here in place, and they got a thorough job of that. They did really good on that.
So, I mean, in a possible theory would be here is if this car obviously was released into public use, if it had a space saver or not a space saver.
They changed something.
They had to have it up to the spec. Yep. So that could have been the reason for that, but what's this one here? It's just painted over completely, or?
So the cars had multiple paint jobs from the factory. It wasn't just painted once, it was painted many times. So probably if this was a space saver or whatever other decal this would have been, when they did the second paint job, they probably said, we don't need that anymore, or that's ridiculous, and you can see that this one was painted over too. So at one point, they probably painted over all of the decals and then only replaced this one when it was being sold.
And that may have been the only reason it got another one,
right?
Just because it was painted over. So on one hand, they go out of their way to be meticulous for the show car, the beauty of it, and then on the other hand, they're sloppy, right? So I guess things haven't changed that much.
So we are looking for tires for this car.
Oh yeah, so if you look in those factory photos, on the PHS it had a red line tire, but when it was a show car right away, it had the pinstripe white wall tire. And in '67, it was very unique. They had the white oval tire, the high performance tire came out. These cars all had E7014 tires. Firebirds where a GTO had an F7014 or a Chevelle or whatever. But the spacing of the red line or the white wall was farther out than all other years. And what happened was people would go around the corner fast and they would scuff that white wall because it was too far out to the end of the tire. Well, we want this thing to be as close to accurate as possible. And we have, I think, 2. I have 1 red line. And we bought one last year at the swap meet. So we are on a journey to have 4 '67 tires. They typically come as a spare. Yep. What we have learned from a really knowledgeable Chevelle friend is that they didn't recall them, but when people would bring these cars into the dealership and would complain about their tire, they were instructed to replace all 5 tires. So it even makes it difficult to find tires, spares. Yeah, so, but it has been accomplished at least one time. Yeah. And we're on our way. So if anyone knows of a Firebird with a full-size spare, that'd be pretty valuable to us. So, or 3 or 4 of them. Yeah. So, anyway. And you know, I guess as we find more details out, we'll share these, whatever other discoveries we'll have. We'll touch base on this project at a couple of points through the process. We hope to have this car all done at the end of 2025. And we're hoping to put it on a rotisserie and have a nice display. And we'll check in check in as we go, and maybe we'll have more needs or wants for a special part or something like that as we go. But we hope that you enjoy these videos, and stay tuned in for more on the 1967 Pontiac Skydiver.
Thanks for watching.
We thought it would be interesting to tell the story of how this car came to be here in our shop. And basically, the story goes something like this, that we know the car was a show car. We believe that Bill Mitchell drove the car for a little while after the show. From there, we got to skip all the way into modern times. We have no idea what this car did all through the 70s and even the 80s, even the 90s, quite frankly. But it was in California, we do know that much. And here's where the story picks up. There was a guy in California that could see over the fence into his neighbor's yard, and I guess this was an interesting character, maybe he did some illegal activities. This guy thought, wow, that's a cool looking old Firebird. I think I'll get that car from the guy before he's in jail or dead or whatever his thinking was. Buys a car, brings it home, keeps it for an undetermined amount of time, and advertises it for sale. So another gentleman who I believe was a fireman was nearing retirement, and he sees the ad, he comes down and he buys the car. The first guy pays maybe like $400, $500, $800 for the car, really inexpensive. This guy pays something along the lines of $6,000 or $7,000, $8,000 for the car, hauls it up to more of a Central California location. He discovers what the car is. They put an article in, I think, Pontiac Enthusiast magazine or in Smoke Signals magazine, and a lot of guys find out that this car exists. They dig up some of the old factory photos, and the whole world knows that the Skydiver has been found and it exists. However, the article says this car is currently under restoration. And that probably kept a lot of the collectors from really going after the car. They just figured one day it'll turn up, they'll see it, and that'll be that. Well, the guy never really got around to it. He's busy, he's doing his thing. And that's kind of where I enter the picture. I have a friend, Matt, down in Arizona who knew about this car. He had a relationship started with a guy. He was talking back and forth. And I just go crazy over the car. I love the thing. I want it to come through our shop to be restored by one of my customers. So behind me here is the 70 GTO Humbler. We had a very similar story there, and I thought, well, this Firebird would be the perfect car for my customer, Phil Mitchell. So I start telling him about it, telling him the history. He's up for it. Then I go back to Matt and I say, let's try to get this car bought from the guy. And it was a little bit on again, off again type of a thing that went over a period of months, and we're able to buy the car. It ends up being a low six-figure purchase, and at the last minute, literally in the last couple of days, there was a flurry of activity. A couple of other good collectors got wind that it was being sold, and literally one of our good friend customer literally backed away from buying it because we were farther down the road in the process. So we were able to get this car. We're very excited about it. Can't wait to have it done and presented, probably at the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals. And just a wonderful piece of history, which is one of our favorite things here at Level 1 Restoration.